Christie, I am thrilled to have our guest today. His name is Scott Ingram, and he's familiar with podcasts.
And frankly, I think what the average seller is doing today is hurting the profession because they're just sort of spamming people, and it's just they're creating a lot of noise and not a lot of value.
He has two successful podcasts, Sales Success Stories, which is, if you haven't heard this podcast, you need to go out and download it. I love this. It's basically real world people who are being successful at what they do every single day. And one that I haven't had as much time to dive into is the Inspired Marketing podcast. So I'm really looking forward to talking with Scott today. And we've already had some interesting pre-recording conversations. So it'll be a fun episode for sure.
Hi, Christie.
Hi, Jeff.
We're recording now.
The many hours of conversation you and I have had, we've had probably half of them that haven't been recorded.
You know what we should do? We should start a podcast.
You think? Let's call it The Why and the Buy.
All right. And we're back. Thanks for being with us here on the Why and the Buy podcast. We record regularly on Tuesdays. Episodes get released on Thursdays. Today is a Tuesday, and we are honored to have a guest with us by the name of Scott Ingram. You may have heard of him. You may not have, but you will definitely know who he is after today. How are you, Scott?
I'm well. Thanks for having me, Jeff and Christie.
Just pumped to have you. So let's just dive right into it. You are one of the most well-connected men in sales among top producers, primarily because you have a top producer, a number one producer, or a top 1% producer on your podcast every single episode. That's all you do. You specialize in it. How on earth did you get a gig doing that?
Yeah. Well, sometimes when you want something and it doesn't exist, you have to go create it. And that's exactly what this podcast was. So I have been in sales for the last, I don't even want to count, over a decade. And I've consumed so much sales content. I've read all the books and read all the magazines. And then, a number of years ago, really got into podcasts. And my frustration with all of that content is it comes from quote unquote sales experts who haven't sold anything but themselves in years or decades. And I thought, this is garbage, right? I want to know, I think sales is evolving really, really quickly. And if we get into some of the marketing stuff, I can give you some more thoughts around that, because I've watched marketing evolve. And I think sales is a little bit behind that curve, but catching up quickly. Sales is moving really, really fast and changing fast. So I don't care about what worked 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I care about what's working right now for the people who are the very best. So the best evidence of success is they're too damn busy to write a book. And that's really what the show is about, right? It's pulling those folks out. And
I knew I was successful. That's awesome. Thank you.
But it's one of those things where I want to bring out, my criteria is you are the number one seller in your organization, or if you work for a huge company, you're in the top 1%. And we dive super deep. My inspiration is the Tim Ferriss show. I sort of stole his tagline, and I think of this as deconstructing world-class sales performers. And we just get in deep and trying to understand, what is the mindset? How do they structure their day? How are they organized? What tools are they using? What strategies are they using? What is working right now today to be successful in sales? And I have talked to some amazing folks. And, a podcast is such an amazing tool. I mean, I know we're going to talk a little bit about social media and social networking today. I would argue the podcast is one of those tools. And in my day job, so I am an active quota-carrying individual contributor sales rep. I run that Inspired Marketing podcast for my company. We work in a very niche space. We work with large enterprise clients that are using the Oracle Marketing Cloud. And so we're a services and technology services provider that works around that. And so we only care about a few hundred, many hundred, maybe a couple thousand people, but it's very, very niche. And that podcast is about sharing their stories. It's a very similar theme, right? All of the shows that I do are the practitioners themselves, what they're doing. And we're doing that on the marketing side because, again, the content doesn't exist. The vendors are all, here's our position, and they're driving a particular agenda. And frankly, I don't care. I care about what's working in the real world. And the reality is, it is the greatest door opener on the planet. Because instead of my reaching out to, and if you look at who's been on that show, I mean, I've had Lenovo, United Health Group, the Chicago Bears, Dun & Bradstreet. I mean, I've had huge companies on that show. And the outreach is so different than, hey, Jeff or Christie, can I get 30 minutes of your time to give you some freaking spiel? And, you're going to ignore me versus, hey, Christie, you're doing some really amazing stuff. I would love to share that with my audience. I've got this podcast. Will you come on as a guest? And the acceptance rate of that is pretty high.
Yeah, no kidding.
Will you please come on my show and tell your story to people you probably want to tell it to?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and they're your peers, right? They're the people who could hire you in the future. I mean, these represent future opportunities. It represents just an outlet for them to share best practices in the industry. And it really is. I mean, the reason that show is called Inspired Marketing is it's about inspiration, right? Ideally, that show is exactly what the guest of that show wants to listen to. So it's an amazing tool. And then with what I'm doing on the sales side, just the relationships that I'm able to build. There was a really good comment today, Jeff, you and I, well, I guess all three of us were on the Sales Hacker Chat. And there was a good comment towards the end about mentoring and people often wanting to pick people's brain and take advantage of that and have nothing to give. Well, what I'm able to do is I'm able to give really an outlet for the best in the world. And I think of it for them, it's mentoring at scale. Right? They get a hit up for this conversation all the time. What if you had that conversation with me once and could share that with the 50 people a year that reach out to you? Right. And so that's what it's all about. Everybody wins. I win because I build these great relationships. And now I have those mentors. They're my mentors. But it's also they win, and the audience and the sales community more generally comes out way ahead because you get to learn from what's actually working today, not some theory in a book.
Right. Well, and I tell you what, Scott, I know Jeff and I feel this as well on the podcast. There's a selfish element too. You get to just chat with some really cool people. I mean, if you get to choose the networking discussions that you have, there's nothing better than the podcasting environment. It's a captive audience, and you really get to talk about some really juicy topics and things that are on your mind on a day-to-day basis. There's a tremendous value there.
Yeah. And it's real engagement, right? This isn't, oh, well, we tweeted back and forth. And, so we've shared 1,048 characters between us. Like, no, we're going to share thousands of words between us right now in our time together, which is amazing.
Right.
What have you learned through the connections? What have been the common denominators between those connections that you've released to date?
Yeah, there's a number of things. The most common theme really is that there is no common theme. And I think the lesson here is that it's not a formula. It's not a prescription that if you do exactly this, you're going to do it. Right.
Thank you for saying that. For saying that. But go ahead. I didn't mean it.
Well, but the reality is what they're doing. So one, and Jeff, you made a great comment today in that tweet chat about you can't be the best if you're doing what the average seller is doing. If you're doing what everybody else is doing, there's no way you can rise above. And frankly, I think what the average seller is doing today is hurting the profession because they're just sort of spamming people, and it's just they're creating a lot of noise and not a lot of value, right? So what they're doing is they are really super understanding of themselves and their strengths. Because I tell you, the personality, I've had a lot of people who've called themselves out as introverts. I mean, these are not the people that you would think traditionally, right, are at the top of the leaderboard, but they are really consistently. And again, they're just taking advantage of the things that make them who they are, and they're taking it to a whole nother level and just using the crud out of that stuff. And that's what makes them successful. So the trick is you kind of have to listen to them all. You have to find those little nuggets, which has always been my approach over the years, right? All those sales books and all those other things I've used that to assemble sort of my own style and my own approach. That's what you have to do. This is not something that you're going to read one sales book and voila, I've got all the answers and we're ready to go.
Well, and I think what is common among introverts is that they're very thoughtful.
Exactly.
Which is a flag that I fly on a regular basis. And I think that, and I would identify as an introvert more than an extrovert, certainly. And I think as we gain confidence and when your tribe gets a little bigger, you can afford to let your hair down a little bit. Not that mine's a whole lot longer than yours, Scott, but the idea that there is a lot of analysis that's put into it, whereas the extrovert tends to be the person who just kind of goes out there to see what flies and what sticks, and that can work, but it's interesting when you put it together, and I see more and more out there. I see it on podcasts. I see it in kind of webinars and Q&A sessions. You see it in LinkedIn posts. What's the number one thing I can say to guarantee that my email gets read? And then someone will write, very wisely, will write a blog post that'll say the 5 things you need to say in every email to guarantee that they get read. So now what we're doing is we're all playing in the same pool. We are all using the same tactics and techniques. We are homogenizing everything. And what's interesting, too, is I saw an interview actually just earlier today where I'm blanking on his name, and I apologize for not being able to drop this guy's name. But he said, listen, when you send that generic email out, maybe you send 100 emails out, maybe you get 2 responses, and that feels like a great response rate. But what you've done for the 98 people that it didn't respond to is you have poisoned the well, and now they're conditioned to believe that they're just going to get generic stuff from you all the time. You just made it that much harder for yourself for those 98 people, despite the fact that you traded them for 2 that responded. And I thought that was delightfully insightful, because that's a way that I've not thought about it before. When you reduce yourself to the common denominator, I mean, you're really doing yourself a disservice, but that's what people are asking for constantly, and it just drives me nuts.
Well, and you have to realize there's a cost. I mean, that's what's underlying all of that. So sure, you can use that technique, but I try to go pretty broad in the types of folks that I talk to on the show. So at this point, I think maybe I've had 3 SDR episodes that are live. I've got another one that's been recorded. Those guys are researching and personalizing and investing the time to understand who's on the other end and bringing them insights and bringing them value and trying to break through in creative ways. That's what works. It's not the freaking spam cannon, I mean, the other side of that cost, not only did you make it harder for yourself, you made it harder for everybody else. And realistically, you probably tarnished your own brand, the brand of your company and the brand of yourself. So to your point, opening that door in the future in some other way, when you do decide to, I'm going to make this a little bit more personal, that door's been closed. Like, unsubscribe, I've got you blocked. I'm not going to see your stuff, even if it is great.
Yep.
So tell me, Scott, you have been on both sides of the house, right? You've been on the sales and business development side. You've been on the marketing side as well. How do you balance that out? Because ultimately, for some companies, you have to reach out to the masses. So where is the line between really being just an annoyance and actually adding value? How do you find that?
Yeah. At the end of the day, and just to be clear, the only reason I'm on the marketing side is because that's who my customer is, right? That's who I sell to. So it's sort of an extreme form of empathy that I do marketing-ish things. But at the end of the day, I've always been a sales guy. If you look at in the marketing space, one of the big themes over the last number of years was content marketing. And now that's evolving a little bit. The next big buzzword is account-based marketing. Well, both of those things, if you really dig deeply into them, are about content marketing is not done well, is not create tons and tons and tons of content and fill the world with crud. It is be very thoughtful, define your personas and the different people you're trying to reach, and be as relevant and valuable as possible to get the person on the other end to want to engage with you, right? That's what content marketing is. And account-based marketing is basically an extension and a continuation and a maximization of that. It's about creating a more personalized message, because now the account that I'm going after is LinkedIn. Okay, what does LinkedIn care about? What does my messaging to LinkedIn need to look like? And that's what that account-based marketing is. So the good news is I think marketing is already headed there, right? Marketing is going down this path of hyper personalization. I mean, the holy grail on that side of the world is right message, right channel, right time, right? So that's what we're trying to get to. That is not all messages, all people, all the time. Right. Which basically was marketing 40 years ago. Right. Yeah. Now it's becoming more and more and more targeted. Sales somehow has gone in the wrong direction lately with kind of these sales automation tools and things like that. But what's interesting is I think all of the top SDRs that I've had on the show use SalesLoft. Right. And Kyle Porter, the CEO of SalesLoft, company. Yeah, he'll say their tool can be used for good or for evil. Right. Yeah. The best in the world are using it for good. Unfortunately, there are too many people that are using it and outbound.io and a lot of other tools kind of in that space for evil. And they're not taking the time to personalize it and use it as a tool to make them better. They're just loading up the spam cannon. And we all know how effective spam is. I mean, Jeff, I know you buy Viagra online all the time, right? Constantly.
I'm exactly in their target audience. I am a male. They got that far in my profile and decided that I was their target market. You're right. And I think ABM is one of those buzzwords, like social selling was one of those buzzwords. It seems to be kind of fading a little bit because all the people who are on the social selling bandwagon are now talking about ABM, and the two work pretty well together. But I used to carry a bag and work for a company, and the company had a marketing message, and I would go out and I would personally call on people. And this is archaic sounding now. Oh my gosh, you left your house, you got out from behind your desk and you knocked on doors? Yes, I actually had paper business cards too. It was amazing. And when something didn't work, I knew that there was something I had to change. And then after you get told no half a dozen times, you start thinking, well, maybe I should just lead with that thing that I know that they're already going to be angled toward. I don't know why I sold in orthopedics. I don't know why this foot and ankle surgeon would need a spinal implant, so I'm not going to sell them the spinal implant. I'm going to gear something toward them. And so what you find is that account-based marketing is something that outside sales reps have been practicing for years. But all of a sudden, the people who've never been out from behind their desk, and not a slight on SDRs or people who work in call centers or, war rooms or whatever it is, but like that is something, just so you guys know, that is something that really comes intuitively to people who speak to a lot of people on a regular basis. And what drives me crazy is like, wow, why are we not thinking about this? Why does it have to be a hashtag, a trending hashtag, in order to get anybody's attention? That to me is just significant of something far more nefarious than spam cannons and blue pills.
So I was going to say, this is no different than, account-based marketing, social selling, whatever you want to hang kind of on the buzzword. Jeff, I know this is your hot button, right? Why do we have to even call it that? Mm-hmm. Because where I'm from, both of those things are selling.
Yes.
Right. That is sales using the tools that are at your disposal. Right. And the tools evolve and the tools change. If we go back 20 years ago, mostly before I was selling, we had like beepers, payphones, fax machines. We had direct mail. There were fewer channels, but we knew what they were and we used those tools at the time. Now there's more tools. We have more ability to understand, particularly, the way that I think that what social selling is to me is it's using those tools. It's using social platforms like LinkedIn, like Twitter, kind of like, hell, I'll put Google in the stack here, and just using it to do research and understand who's the person on the other side of this equation. What do they care about? What's going to interest them? And how do I align myself and the value that I bring to that? It's as simple as that. And then, the other side is, it's an additional communication channel. So I can try to use LinkedIn to get a message in. I can try Twitter. It's another way that I can try and open that door, their cell phone or whatever it is. That's it. It's no more complicated than that.
Well, and I think too, the nice thing about what you described and what you described too, Jeff, is that was an action and a reaction that you could immediately do something with, right? So if we're automating everything and we're assuming that we have the right message for our customer, but we never check back in and actually understand what the customer wants, that feedback loop is broken. So that's what happens in a lot of the automated systems or social selling type systems if you aren't careful to insert the people back into the process.
Yes.
So I think what went wrong, Twitter is almost the perfect example of this, because if you look at the evolution of Twitter, I was on Twitter very early. I mean, heck, Twitter, I'm in Austin, right? Twitter happened here at South by Southwest, right? I was a laggard locally, but I was a laggard because I didn't get on it for the first 6 months or a year, right? I was in very early. In those days, it was truly engagement and amazing relationship building, because you got, even with the people that I knew really well, I got like this intraday snapshot of what was going on in their lives and what they cared about. And that was amazing. And just to begin to create relationships. And what's interesting, I think, is as humans, right, here's this new offline digital social channel. So we should all live behind our desks and there's no reason for us to go out anymore. But what happened in the early days of Twitter? We had tweet ups all the time. Like, I'm building these relationships online, but I got to meet these people. These people are amazing. And we wanted to spend time with each other. Now I equate Twitter to, it's this stadium that is raucous and super, super loud. And I've got a selfish message that I want to put out. So what do? I put in my earplugs. I put on my noise canceling headphones because I don't want to hear anything. And I'm going to bring my megaphone and I'm going to go into that stadium and I'm going to scream so I can be heard.
What an
I wonder why it doesn't really work.
Yeah, what a great picture. You should have somebody draw that out for you, because that was perfect.
You went from 5 people at a coffee shop just getting together because they met and happened to be in the same place. Back when, and this is a topic probably for another podcast, but back when social media was actually about connecting with people and it wasn't just about farming and mining data. But, you go from that quiet, intimate, real connective environment to the stadium where you've got multiple pairs of headphones on to tune everybody out. I noticed that a long time ago, is that people who seem to use social media the most effectively get in and get out. They're there, or they post stuff on an automated basis, or they make their points and then they're gone. They don't stick around for the afterglow, so to speak.
Well, and that's the issue, right? The issue is that we've all automated our push and our messaging. I don't think anybody reads the damn feed anymore. No. So the only way it works is if you're calling somebody out, if you're at mentioning somebody, or the sales packer chat, that's a good example, right? That's actual real engagement, kind of, where we're supposed to be having a conversation. And although, again, everybody just sort of shares their answers and there's a lack of engagement. So that is universal. The other issue is, I think, social, if you look at the other side of this equation, right? If you are Facebook or you are Twitter or you run one of these platforms, you want people to be engaged, at least in terms of using it and consuming it. And so they've gamified the crud out of it. They've figured out all of how we're wired, and it's a death trap of distraction. I finally got to the point. I've been wanting to do this forever, Jeff. I think when we talked a while ago, I was threatening it. I finally pulled the trigger because I got the last thing done I needed to do on Facebook. I deactivated my account.
Congratulations.
There is nothing of value in there for me. It's just a black hole of distraction, because frankly, Facebook is too damn good. They know all of our hot buttons and how to get us hooked on this dopamine drug. And I'm not having it. I got better things to do with my life.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting about Facebook for me is I was at that point probably a year or two ago before I started my business. And I would delete it from time to time, or I would just kind of take it off my phone. So, I could go back, and I have grandkids, so I want pictures. Those things are important. But now Facebook has become a huge, coalescing point for groups for me. So I have a golfing group that I'm a part of. I have a book group that I started. I have a podcasting group that I'm a part of. And it's a much smaller subset of the overall Facebook family. And it is specific to the things that I'm interested in. So just simply by having those groups, I have created what is of value to me and doesn't pull me down that black hole of distraction. As it's, you're absolutely right. It most certainly can be that, but it has become a lot more interesting for me, even from a business standpoint, than what I expected.
Well, and Christie, I think that is the perfect approach, right? Yeah. You are taking ownership and control, and you have a strategy and an approach that you're using. Am I telling everybody, hey, you all need to deactivate Facebook and run for the hills? No, that probably makes sense for almost nobody. It made sense for me. For me, my people live in LinkedIn. So that's where I'm most engaged. I mean, I'm in B2B sales, right? All of my customers or clients are there, and they're relatively active because they're digital marketers and that kind of thing. That works, and I own it and control it and don't let it consume me. And I think that no matter who you are, that's what you have to do. You have to really think hard about, okay, what is it that I'm trying to accomplish? Of all of these tools that are out there, what of those tools could help me accomplish that? And how can I best use or wield those tools without getting bit by the double-edged sword that they can be, right?
Well, it makes me wonder if we're going to go back to the message board. It was the internet of early on was message boards and listservs and things like that. And those things have all gone way by the wayside. But now, listen, Christie, you're not alone. You know that I'm on that team too. Like, okay, well, I guess I have to go to check in and see if someone posted something on the thing.
You're only on it because I told you we had to do it for the podcast.
And, but as I get involved with some of these other online courses and some of these other networking things where I'm finding the discussion on the discussion boards is great, and that's all I need. I get a notification when someone comments. I can go to a place when people are actually discussing things for the same reason that I'm there discussing things, and that becomes a really valuable tool that is so much more simple than let us find out where you live, how much money you make, who your friends are, where you've been, location tracking services, all this other stuff. It's like, if it's about the discussion, then let's have the discussion. And I think that's why a tool like Slack gets a lot of credit for enabling that in a channel outside of email, but one that's more engaging. I've used discussion boards from Moot and Discourse and a couple others that are out there. And I think that, also not sponsors of this podcast, just saying, feel no responsibility to go check those out. But I think what was old becomes new again sometimes when you think about what is it we're trying to get out of this. And Scott, we were talking about this before we started recording because someone was a laggard with the hitting the button. But how many of those top performers that you're interviewing and that you've published the interviews for, how many of them are really, really active on social media or even have Twitter handles?
Yeah, there's the key question, right? So if you look at the 19 people that I've talked to so far, maybe a third even have a Twitter handle. A number of them are fairly active on LinkedIn, but I think, again, there's a zealous protection of their time and their selling time and a deep understanding of what's going to serve me and where do I need to spend that time. And is that Twitter? For most of them, no, not at all. For many of them, is that LinkedIn? Yeah, probably, but in intelligent doses. I mean, I talked to the number one account rep at LinkedIn, so he uses LinkedIn, but even he is not, super deep into it. But I don't think that actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm trying to, I know one for sure, maybe two don't even have a LinkedIn profile, but most people are somewhat active on that. And then I can't comment on Facebook because I have no idea.
Right. Right. Well, the answer is everybody's on Facebook. Right?
Except me,
almost because, there was the social pressure and the guilt of not being on Facebook, so you had to be there. And then, LinkedIn was just that place where you went looking for a job. So what do you mean you want to contact me on LinkedIn or connect with me on LinkedIn? Are you in the job market? And, it's become more than that, but it's also in some ways it's devolving into some sort of, like, that's where everybody who's tired of Facebook ended up going. And now it's just become a cesspool of complaints and people whining about the new format changes and things. And it's that well is being poisoned again. And it's just, I think, to your point, to circle it back, you have to use the tools at your disposal in a way that they benefit you, not just because everybody out there is doing it. The peer pressure is real.
Well, and the pendulum will swing back.
Yeah.
Right. So I think we've gone to this weird, like, mass media kind of idea. Right. And that's the distinction I think of. Right. To me, there's social media and there's social networking. Mm-hmm. I'm interested in the social networking, not the blast, like it's all about some contest to see how many followers you can get in that silly game. That has nothing to do with that. I think we're going to go back towards more human, more intimate, more human relationships. And I accidentally pressed this button recently. I posted, I was actually ranting on LinkedIn because I had gotten these series of generic connection requests from people who I had no idea who they were. Mm-hmm. And I copied it up there about 3 times into my status update, just said, nope, nope, nope. And I said, look, if you're not going to spend 10 seconds to add a note and provide me some context, that work shouldn't be on me. I shouldn't have to go, now, why am I trying to go?
Yeah.
Why do I need to be connected with you? So Christie executed perfectly today, right? We weren't connected on LinkedIn before. She sent me a connection request. She had a note in there. And it was, hey, I'm really looking forward to talking with you on the podcast. Hope we can connect here.
Yep.
Yeah,
2
of
seconds.
Course. Absolutely. That post was viewed 780,000 times. It was liked and commented on over 3,500 times. And I think because it just struck this common nerve of we're all so fed up with this mass, impersonal, not real, inhuman way that people are using the platforms, and if it takes 10 seconds. Like, this is the difference, Jeff. I mean, between the average sales performer that is doing average things and the people that are at the top, 10 seconds, 30 seconds, like start on somebody's profile. And so the excuse, just because I learned a lot from this post, the excuse is, oh, well, I'm on mobile and that's not an option. Here's what you do. You start on somebody's profile, because how can you make a connection request to me if you've never looked at my profile? Like, you saw my title and that was interesting. So you start on their profile. So then when they look at who's viewed my profile, they see you. Oh, good idea. And even if you're on mobile, if you hit the little 3 buttons in the top right-hand corner, it says send a personalized invite. So there is no excuse ever to send an impersonalized message, even if you know that person. And you know what I'll do when I know somebody? I'll send them and I'll add that note and I will write linky linky. Because at least it doesn't say, Scott would like to be a part of your professional network, or whatever the heck that freaking common thing is.
Generic one
at least this is me, this is legit, and you get a small taste of my quirky personality.
Right.
Nice.
Linky,
that's awesome. Linky. I love it.
That's the title of the episode. But
is it? Okay, I'm writing that down. Linky. Yeah, no, we won't do that to you.
You need better link bait than that.
Oh, that's funny. So,
excellent.
All right. So what are you reading right now? We're shifting gears, but because we've got to kind of start to think about wrapping this up, or just recording a double album, we could do that. But what are you reading right now, Scott?
Yeah, this is exactly why my average interview is like 75 to 90 minutes, because I don't put a time constraint on it, and I want to go really deep with these folks. Well, it's getting to be summer, so I'm trying to change gears a little bit and move into the fiction realm a little bit. So I've got the latest Lee Child book. So that one's called Night School. But Jeff, I know your other question is, kind of what's the most impactful sales book? Honestly, there's nothing in the sales realm that I'm really reading right now. And I can't really call out any single book as being even the anchor. I mean, one that does stand out, and maybe just because I got the awesome opportunity to be on his podcast recently, was John Jantz, who wrote Duct Tape Marketing. Many people know him from that, but he wrote a book called Duct Tape Selling. And it really is kind of this idea. It's the greatest tagline in the world, especially for a guy like me who sells to marketers, because the tagline was think like a marketer and sell like a rock star. So it talked about a lot of these different social strategies and things like that. So that there were pieces of that a lot of them I was kind of already doing, but it was a good distillation. I would actually say one of the most impactful books that I've read in the last couple of years wasn't really sales related. There's a book called Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink.
Yes, I've heard of that. That is a scary dude, by the way.
It is a very scary dude. So if you're listening to this, you're a podcast fan, go find the Tim Ferriss episode with Tim talking with Jocko. So Jocko was the most decorated Navy SEAL commander in the history of the universe, was running really crazy, nasty stuff in the middle of Fallujah and Iraq. And so he came back and wrote a business book. And it's such an interesting model because each chapter is, here's the lesson. Here's the military application. And here's how you apply this to business.
Oh, interesting.
And the thing for me that really came out of that, like the concept, was this idea that discipline equals freedom. And so if you put this in a military context, these guys are drilled and drilled and drilled. Like they get up at the same time, they tie their shoes the same way, like everything is defined for you, like thinking optional, basically, right? But when all of that stuff is already figured out and basically muscle memory, now you don't have to use the brain cycles to think about that, and you can think at a higher level and really be creative. So my application of that is I have put a lot of systems and processes into the way that I work so that I don't have to think about a lot of those things, so that I have that capacity to be more creative in my approach and find more valuable ways to connect with and communicate with my clients and prospects. And so that was really a pretty game-changing book for me.
That's really interesting that you say that too, because you were going in that place, and I know there's a bunch of people who were thinking, yeah, exactly. I don't have to think. I can automate this stuff. I have a process and everything. You're like, yo, great. So now that you don't have to spend that energy thinking about this stuff that you don't want to think about, now you can take it to the next level. Whereas a lot of people would say, all right, I'm going to put my feet up, grab a beer, and play PlayStation. It's a completely different approach. And I did not listen to the episode where he interviews, where Jocko is interviewed by Tim Ferriss. I listened to the episode where Jocko took over the podcast and took questions.
Okay. Yeah.
He took, it's like a bonus episode or whatever. And he took questions, and he took a lot of great questions and gave a lot, and in some ways talked about his experiences over there in combat, and also talked about just some of those applications of the way we run things efficiently and very, very effectively in the military, and how those lessons apply to business. Christie and I just did an episode a couple of weeks ago with someone talking about the parallels between sales and golf. There are a ton of similar parallels between business and the military, and really succeeding in any kind of an operation. So it's really interesting how much all of business and life are intertwined if you just look.
Yeah, for sure. But let me make a really important call out here, though. Like, sales is hard,
really,
but our lives are never on the line. Like, the amount of respect that I have for folks that put on the uniform and do that work for us is immense, right? And what he has done and the people he's led, and frankly, anybody who has served and taken that risk, that's huge. And I appreciate that a lot. And yes, there are a lot of lessons that we can learn, but the stakes are not nearly as high.
Sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm downloading that as soon as we hang up today, because I love that whole concept of discipline equals freedom. Mm-hmm. There are so many parallels that you can draw there. And I can see that in many different instances even with clients that I've worked with that have really allowed distractions and lack of discipline to drive too much of their lives. And so I'm going after that one.
Well, and just one final point, and we could do 2 episodes on this topic alone.
Scott, we're having you back. I don't
Good.
know if you know that or not. You don't really have a choice. So yeah.
I love doing this. And this is the best format, right? It's just, we get to have a good, valuable conversation. We get to know each other. We get to understand kind of where those thought processes are coming from. And I sure hope it's valuable for your audience.
Absolutely.
And everybody that's taken the time to listen to us. But the mindset piece is so critical. I had Kyle Gutzler on the podcast. His episode at this point is actually the most popular. He had previously, and this is how I found him, he wrote a post on LinkedIn. I'll give you a direct link to that post. If you go to top1.fm/2x, the number 2, the letter X, that'll get you straight through to the post. It won't even take you to my website. He wrote a post about how he doubled his sales in 1 year. And one of the mindset pieces that he talks about is he basically didn't even know what his quota was. There's so many lessons in this, like the level of prep. I can tell, like, even amongst those that are the best, that are at the level they get to come on my show, even amongst them, I can see levels of distinction based on how much work did they do getting ready.
Yeah.
Right. And so Kyle and we had a longer conversation the day before than the actual interview, and the interview was over an hour.
Right.
Right. And part of what happened in that pre-interview, and fortunately I did record the whole thing, and that lives in our sales success community. So it does live on. But we were talking about, I was like, okay, well, what percentage of plan were you? He did not know. He's like, wait, hang on. I have to go see what my quota was.
Yeah.
Right. Because that was never the bar. And yet I think so many people, they treat that as the level. My episode that went live today with Christine Isakovic, who's the top pharmaceutical sales rep, one of, again, I had a couple of people that have been like number one of about 150. She's like, I wanted to be number one. Like, that's all there is. That's all there was. Like, that mindset, that drive, everything that goes behind that, the learning, what all the discipline and what it's going to take to get there. That is the game. And so the mindset, the discipline, Eli from the Tony Robbins organization, he talked a lot about discipline and how it's just building those habits and structures. And again, it's a very, very common theme. And one thing I'll leave for you guys, you can put into the show notes. I've been working my butt off, and you guys saw the evidence of this in the Sales Hacker Chat and the way that I did it. I have been trying to pull out, recognizing not everybody has an hour and a half to invest in each one of these 19 conversations I've done to date. So I'm really working on pulling out the clips and the insights to give people a chance to kind of preview that, and as a nice way to review. I don't want to go listen to the 75 minutes again. Just give me the highlights to remind me of kind of the core principles. So I've started to consolidate these on a single page on my site. So if you go to top1.fm/clips, CLIPS, so like clips of audio. I try and keep them about a minute and a half each. Some of them run a little bit long, but that's where I've got them all. And they're all just kind of linked up, and you can see them sort of by quote or by theme against each episode. So great way to connect with me and the show, and just these insights and a lot of detail around that mindset, those habits, those rituals that are driving way outsized success.
Absolutely. And I will make sure we include those in the show notes. We'll have a link off to that for you as well. And Scott, if people want to find you, how do they reach you?
Yeah. So the first thing I want you to do is you're probably in a podcast app right now. Please flip over, look up the Sales Success Stories and subscribe. I would love for you to listen and provide some input. But you know what? The best way with all of this, especially the talk that we've had today about the engagement, send me a note. Like, be a human. I like email. You can send me a note to Scott@top1.fm. That's the number 1. And talk about what in this conversation resonated most with you. And then we can go from there and go to LinkedIn and Twitter and whatever else.
Wonderful. So Scott, we always ask our guests one question, and that is a question you can take in any direction you wish, but what is your why?
So my why is, and I came up with this a while ago, maybe 5 years ago, it's inspiration squared. And what I mean by that is really being on both sides of inspiration. I find that when I'm in a position, and I learned this at a pretty early age, like late high school, that even if I pretended that people were watching what I was doing, I rose to the occasion and I performed at a higher level. So I try and be an inspiration in the way that I act and the things that I do. But I love to be inspired. I love to hear stories of success. I mean, it's sort of no brainer. I mean, this show has been, even though I'm only whatever it is, about 8 months into having the show live, it has been a vision for a number of years that I've been building towards, because this is really the core of who I am and what that why is all about. And it's super fun to be delivering it.
Wonderful.
Awesome.
Excellent. Thank you so much. It was wonderful to meet you, and I'm glad I got a chance to participate in the Sales Hacker Chat with you earlier today before we got on the podcast. But I do hope you'll come back, because like I said, I think we're going to hound you until you do. We would love to continue the conversation.
No hounding required. It's been my pleasure.
Excellent.
Well, I think we need to tweet up or something like that, because
a tweet up sounds bad in Austin, I think. And I think that's, Atlanta's great right now, but Austin sounds pretty good too.
Yeah. Well, we're getting into the summer. Yeah, I was going to say Austin is fantastic in October and November. August, not so much.
Yes.
I won't be here.
Fair enough.
Thanks, Scott.
Fair enough. All right, Scott, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for listening to us on the Why and the Buy podcast. If you like us, tell us. Send us a message at the Why and the Buy on Twitter, or leave us a 5-star review on iTunes or wherever you got this podcast. We'd love to hear from you. Talk to you next week.
Would you do me the courtesy? Come back and bring me up to speed.
How about the music on this podcast? We call them our house band, they call themselves Haskins, and they're based out of Plymouth, Michigan. If you want to hear more from them, go to haskinsmusic.com and check them out.